This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring, ring, ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey man, just heading out of the house now. Quite sunny, bit cold. It's been bit dismal weather the last couple of days. It's 2 days till Halloween. To check the forecast, it's apparently going to be raining, which is a shame. Quite looking forward to doing trick-or-treating with my daughter, but still do it. But yeah, definitely puts a damper on things. I've been a little under the weather lately. This is actually my first time venturing out the house in a few days. I was going to do the nursery run. So I thought I'd send you a quick voice message now. I've been watching all my horror movies, October, in the thick of it now. Watching a horror film every day, and I've seen a lot of really good ones lately. Some of them, ones that I was revisiting. I've done quite a few rewatches this year. And, yeah, interesting. Watched Audition a few days ago. I was too under the weather to really muster the enthusiasm to send you a voice note at the time, but yeah, really, really liked it. So I saw it when it came out. Bit of a sensation when it was released. Would have come out around the same time as The Ring and The Grudge and Battle Royale, like a bunch of, I guess what I was really noticing was Japanese movies, but now having kind of looked back and done a bit more of a deeper dive over the years, Korea was also like really popping off. Maybe a few years later, a few years after Japan. I think the first wave was these J-horror movies, and Audition was one of them, by Takashi Miike, I believe, who did Ichi the Killer and the remake of Harakiri, Death of a Samurai, which I really, really like as well. Sure, I think he did one called Visitor Q, which was absolutely bananas. Can't remember exactly what he did, but he's very prolific and he's very celebrated. I think this was the movie. This has got to be one of those like watershed moments, the release of Audition, in terms of like a new generation getting kind of aware of a film scene going on in Japan. And I watched it at that time. So I would have been, what age would I have been? Oh, Jesus, wasn't expecting to actually do the maths now. Get mostly recovered from my illness, but I don't think I've got maths capabilities back yet. But yeah, probably about 14 or 15, something like that. And it's interesting now, going back and watching it now. So like when I would have seen this movie first, it would have been not pre-internet, because obviously we had the internet and we were using it. We were, sending emails and stuff like that. But pre the internet being anything like what it is now. And so when you saw a movie, you really didn't have much to go on. It's not like you'd be listening to podcasts about it, or, we're seeing like Instagram reels about it. Like people wouldn't have even seen it, most parts. Irish countryside back in 1999. Maybe I saw this in 2001 or something. I don't know when I exactly saw it, but back then, it would have been, even if it was a major Hollywood release, I think this would be the case. But certainly, if it was a more kind of under the radar, relatively under the radar movie, like a foreign movie or whatever, you really had no context on it going in, and I don't remember that much about the movie. Obviously I do now because I just rewatched it, but I didn't remember that much from the time, although a lot came back to me as I watched it. But one thing I've always remembered from it is, I think I must have watched it on the basis of like, this is a movie that people are saying is good. That's all I kind of had. That's all I knew. And so when this movie switches into sort of like a kind of horror movie, for want of a better word, I guess like a thriller, suspense thriller, whatever, however you want to put it, when it makes that switch about halfway through, and if it's literally halfway through, but give or take halfway through, when it switches from being sort of like a romantic melodrama into a much darker movie, that was like a fucking massive whiplash for me at the time. And I always regarded it as this movie that, like, you think it's just like a little romantic drama, almost like overly cheesy, overly kind of sentimental, saccharine kind of romantic drama. I know it starts with like a death, but like in my head it was like, this is like TV movie romance thing. And then halfway through it just becomes a completely different beast. And that was the experience of watching this film without the internet. And watching it now, it's a legendary horror film. It's legendary within any kind of sort of grouping of films that you can put it in, like Japanese films or extreme violent cinema, or whatever. Its reputation is so present for me whilst I'm watching the first half of the movie. Now, granted, I've already seen it before, so that's another element. But even if I hadn't seen it before, I think just having it been constantly discussed in the same conversation as like films from the new French extreme or just general J-horror or horror, I think I would be watching the first half of this movie going, I'm watching a slow burn horror movie. That was one interesting kind of difference. It's definitely a better film than I remember it being. I guess I saw it once when I was like, pretty young, probably boiled it down to like a few basic ingredients, but just as a sort of general overall film rather than like, kind of focusing particularly on its shocking moments. It's good. Like you're invested in the characters. The acting is pretty decent. The main character, his Bronx is good. And it's, considering this is the guy that made Ichi the Killer, if I'm not mistaken, I think he made Ichi the Killer like very soon after this, which is the most balls to the wall, like violence fest type movie. This really takes its time, which I guess is, that's a given with everything I've just said, starting off this voice note, but it's not just delaying it for the sake of it. It's like, no, this movie cares about the audition plot. This movie cares about the dead wife plot. This movie cares about the son's relationship plot. Like, this movie is going to take its time with all of these things. And also, when you watch a film that's about like regular life in Japan, or at least for me, it's so foreign, it's so alien to me that it's like kind of interesting watching that and sort of trying to parse through what are people's social norms and things like that. So I find it engaging on that level as well. Probably the only thing that doesn't fully work for me when we're talking about the non-horror sort of first half of the movie, the day-to-day average life of this guy, is what exactly draws him to this girl so much. Second he lays eyes on her little CV proposal cover letter thing, he's smitten, and that doesn't waver at any point. He literally just walks in the room and sees like the back of her head while she sat down, and he's like, yep, that's my girl. Like he's giddy with excitement that she's there, even though he can't even see her face, kind of thing. So I don't quite get the appeal. Not that like it doesn't. I don't by that I don't mean that I'm not attracted to her. I just mean like sometimes in a movie, like when Harry Met Sally or something, you're going like, okay, what's this person's personality? What's that person's what did this person represent? What it kind of makes a bit more sense as a like, well, of course you're going to fall in love with her, and yeah, that was a little bit lost on me, a bit, I suppose. But anyway, sometimes that's the case in real life. You look at someone who's like, yeah, I can see that you're absolutely head over heels with this person. I really don't know what the attraction is, at least compared to like all of the other girls that he's also supposedly auditioning. And that concept, I watched it with my wife, and we were like, talking about Harvey Weinstein a lot while we were watching that first half of the movie. His friend, the movie producer, who's maybe a little bit more morally dubious, I don't know if that's the best way of putting it, that actor actually is in The Wailing, which is a Korean horror film I watched a couple of weeks ago. He's playing a Japanese character in that. Yeah, that stuff, for starters, that stuff now to a Western audience. Put it this way, if you're making an American movie right now, you're probably not going to have that plot play out exactly the way it is. Or if you are, you're going to be interrogating it a bit more overtly, although this film, I think, absolutely interrogates it. But also, I think norms are quite different in Japan, so it's interesting. But watching the film now and being a little bit more conscious of how much the film is sort of like questioning the moral fortitude of this main character, or just of like, I mean, so we got this like little subplot with this secretary of his, or some sort of subordinate co-worker, that we eventually learn that he slept with her once, and then he just sort of like, I don't know if he ghosted her, but he was just like, he didn't want to kind of continue it. Maybe she wanted more from it. She's now going to get married, and there's lots of like baggage there. He's, continued this love affair with his wife for years. I'm not sure how many years it is, but like maybe 7 years or something, since her death. But he's still very much like locked in on that relationship, and then he wants to move on, and he goes along with this ruse. And I like, it's not that common a movie, but I like a movie that's sort of going, so we're not going to make it about like a complete monster of a man, and we're not going to make it about like what almost every movie is about, which is just like the most like ethically and morally pure protagonist you could imagine. We're going to do someone who's like, the sort of like fuzzy morals when something is important to you and you want to get your own way, that I think most people have at some, most people at some point in navigating their life, they've sort of like stretched the limits of their morality. And like, again, I don't think he does anything like too terrible in this movie, but it is kind of a film about like, well, if you get out there in the world and you start doing this, that, and the other, you sleep with your secretary once, but maybe she thought something more was going to come of it. You weren't really interested in anything more. You set up this fake audition, getting in loads of girls in, and I'm not sort of lambasting him here. I think these are like very recognizable, pretty standard traits that a person has. Everyone's got like their things are like, that's not the nicest thing ever. But the movie's kind of like, well, what if those chickens came home to roost to some extent? Of course, it's also just like this girl's a complete psycho, and she is herself like a product of like abuse. She's a product of, well, bad men have like really done a number on her and have really destroyed her and destroyed her every concept she has of like her worth, sex, trust, like faith in men, everything. So seeing him, who's like, you know, very low down on that scale of like bad men, but still like, you know, he's the one who or he's one of the people that happens to got wound up with her in a movie is interesting. I'm just in the car park outside nursery right now. Got to pick the kids up in about 10 minutes. So I'm just going to move on to something that I found quite interesting on this rewatch. So the movie, there's a scene in the movie where he goes to a hotel with the girl and she takes off her clothes and gets into bed, and he gets into bed and he sleeps with her. And then when he wakes up because the hotel room phone is ringing, and it's the clerk at the front desk saying, your partner left, so I just got to call the room to see if you've left as well. Like, is the room empty? And that begins, like, she's saying he can't find her then for ages. She's gone missing. He slept with her. He's been woken up with a phone call, and then she leaves, and that starts this kind of Lynchian fever dream of like tracking her and finding all these like creepy pieces of information. He gets, at one point he goes into like a barricaded up like dance studio, and there's like a guy playing a piano who obviously we get more context on as time goes on, but that goes on and on and on, and it crescendos in the famous torture scene with the acupuncture needles and the chopping of the feet and all that. And then at sort of like the highest point of that, he wakes up back in the bed in the hotel room, and it was all a dream. And actually, what we've just seen for the past 20 minutes, or half an hour, I don't know how long, quite a significant amount of time, has been a fever dream, like a literal dream, of his anxieties about moving on from the security of his wife, who is his soulmate, who's in love with, to this random person that maybe he's come upon in a morally dubious fashion. She's a very young girl. She's an unknown. This is a nightmare about like how bad could that possibly get? And I found that incredibly satisfying. And we've talked about this a lot, that It Was All a Dream is not only hated by us, but I think hated by pretty much everyone. It's like got to be one of the most hated tropes. And this was a rare case of me thinking, oh, that is brilliant. How, I normally hate It Was All a Dream because I'm like, so what, you've been wasting my time all this time? Like that wasn't real. That was all just like complete bullshit. This time I was like, it was a real dream though. How powerful the idea that you would have a dream like that, and how powerful to make a sort of personal life drama and then choose to depict those anxieties in this crazy cinematic way. And then they do a double twist, and it turns out that he goes back to, it wasn't a dream. And it was actually, we go all the way back to the torture scene, and we conclude the movie in a face-off between the main girl with her little bear spray or pepper spray thing and the teenage boy. And I never thought, I didn't remember that for starters, and I never thought that I would say this, but like I really wish that it was all a dream, and that he woke up in that bed with the girl there, and he has to then continue that relationship with her, because obviously it's a dream. Like you know, when someone does something bad to you in a dream, you know, you might hold a grudge for like 2 minutes or something, but ultimately you transcend that, don't you? And you go like, okay, all right, let's be fucking rational here. Like, you didn't actually do those things, but he's now leveled up his consciousness of like how sort of anxious he is about this whole enterprise. So yeah, I found that to be an interesting part of rewatching it, and just kind of like a very interesting narrative beat within the film. Just trying to think if there's any other sort of stray observations to make. It's very ambiguous, I found, in terms of like exactly what was her relationship with the piano teacher, the record label guy that's gone missing. It's mysterious, but I think that's kind of good. It's almost more like she's ultimately unknowable rather than kind of like all tied up with a bow. The gore when it happens, if I remember correctly, there isn't much of a score. It's just her doing her kitty 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 thing, and she's obviously not flinching. Like she is totally comfortable doing this. That is so effective. I mean, it's not surprising that it went on to become one of the most iconic horror scenes of its era. And I think the first time I watched that, I was like, second half amazing, because I was a teenager. First half, you got to sit through that, and then you get the like, head fuck experience. Watching the first half now, I'm more a fan of it, because it's really well acted, it's well paced, it's just good filmmaking. It is a bit cheesy, like it's a bit kind of like the score and stuff is a bit of your sort of TV movie melodrama, but it kind of works for going, look, this guy is just like a stay-at-home dad. He's just a boring guy who's never really involved in anything interesting. And yeah, then when you get the dream, well, like from that sleeping together scene onwards, it's just like the opposite of that. I got to go in and do this nursery run, but I'm eager to hear your thoughts on it. Eager to hear if it's a movie that you're revisiting or a movie you're seeing for the first time. And I guess, I presume if you're watching it now for the first time, well, at the very least, it's a horror film, or at least it's called a horror film. So yeah, let me know what your thoughts are, and we can talk about it some more.
Hey man, just heading out now for a quick walk. It's a very chilled day, very still, and a nice little bit of a chill as the day before Halloween, I think it is, which ironically is my nephew's birthday. What a great day to have your birthday. If you start loving Halloween, it'd probably be your ultimate time to have a birthday, really, considering how much you love Spooktober, and by extension, I presume Halloween. Actually, I don't know where does tying it into October go with this Spooktober thing if you don't like Halloween, because it gets much darker in other months. So I presume you're setting the season and the vibe. Yeah, so yesterday you sent me 3 voice notes, or maybe you sent one the day before, but you certainly sent a Violent Nature yesterday and Audition yesterday. So I was being bombarded with voice notes for your backlog, and I don't like having a backlog of movies, and I always try to have a conversation with you when you're as fresh as possible, because I don't see much merit other than when it comes to splicing our conversations together, perhaps for the one person out there who's listening to our conversations, if there is one. I don't see much benefit in actually having a conversation when I can't recall details, for the most part anyway. Well, not a benefit, but it's much more of a lesser conversation when you can't stand behind your thoughts of a movie. If someone's coming in with like really detailed plot points, and then you've seen the movie 2 months ago, 3 months ago, or even in my case, my memory starts to fade after 2 weeks, a week even, and you can't really stand behind it with specific details, and you have to talk about it in a general way. I find that harder. So when you send a voice note, I'll almost be compelled to get there when I can, as quickly as I can. So yesterday I ended up watching 3 horror movies in one day: Long Legs, A Violent Nature, and then in the evening, because I think you sent the audition voice note in the evening, then I watched that late. So I had a triple bill of horror movies yesterday, and again, Long Legs was not the one to start off on, but luckily with A Violent Nature I had a very good time, so that pepped me up a bit. So yeah, with Audition, it's funny, I don't know if I saw this movie before. If I did, it was a long time ago. There's a few scenes that had a strange sense of deja vu. For one of them was not the torture scene, however. Just a few little scenes, like the one where the guy's playing the piano, I looked a little bit familiar, and there's another scene that looked a little bit familiar, but I just can't say. Maybe I'll check on Letterboxd to see if I've logged it, but I don't think so. But again, I can't say. Now, obviously you curate movies for Spooktober, and you're basically having your own festival, which is fantastic, and you are carefully meticulating them under different circumstances, and one of them is the rewatch, as you've said. So I feel like this movie, hopefully you can hear me now passing this road, so I feel like, not to discredit the whole Spooktober, because Spooktober is your specific thing, I feel like this is a movie that should never be part of a festival. Now, again, it's your festival. It's a festival of one. So I'm not saying you shouldn't have done this, man. But even let's say the Prince Charles Cinema in London, or just a movie, I don't know, a double bill of horrors that's shown on the 31st as part of a horror season. I don't think you should do that to this movie, given my sensibilities. Now, of course, there's people who would have seen the movie already that, when they find out it's showing, would be thinking, okay, great, I'm going to get to see that movie again. But I wish I was just given this movie not knowing the genre, and it was filed under, oh yeah, just watch this, like Victoria, Victoria, that one-shot movie. I think I recommended to you before, where, let's just say, things, it's a movie where you would have benefited not knowing what's going on. And so going into this movie, number one, knowing it's a horror movie really, I think, messes up the surprise that's meant to be had by the pacing. And obviously you've got screenwriters, you've got directors, and when they're writing a movie and when they're planning something, they have a lot of other things in mind compared to the marketing man, or the person who cuts the trailer, which I guess is marketing as well, where they're trying to get people into the cinema who don't just want to go see a cinema movie based on, oh, you should watch this. That's not going to get people in at the box office. So I can understand it. But let's just say, number one, you give it to me for Spooktober. Number two, when I downloaded the movie, the poster that was accompanied to is the shot of the woman with the syringe. So already the movie has been framed two ways. It's been framed as a movie where there's some horror going to happen, and then there is going to be a moment where she has a syringe. So that's already what you have going into it, and I think what most people will have going into it. So as much as the pacing is fantastic, this is the type of movie where it's really well made, everything is probably perfect, and everything that's not my bag is done really well and the best it can be. And yeah, I thought it was good, and I feel like there's scenarios that could have been created for me either by myself or by you or by watching it back in 1999, where I would have probably got the truer experience as intended by the director and the screenwriter. Now, having said that, when I'm watching this movie and I know something's going to kick off, and I know something's going to kick off involving the woman that he has a date with, once you know those parameters are set, and you've seen it before, but at the same time, why am I interested in an hour and a half of something else happening besides the scene that is set up for me? Well, I think number one is very good characters. I think I like the snapshot of Japan and its culture and this type of loneliness that permeates the characters. I think the scenes where he has with the director friend, who's also from The Wailing and a very good voice actor in anime, I really like him as a presence. With characters like that, and I appreciate movies where it feels like these characters would exist and go about their business in a different way had the events of this movie not happened. For instance, I feel like everyone exists in a normal reality where, you know, he picks a different girl and then we just get to see a drama and a relationship movie that's a little bit Coretta-esque at times, there's glimmers of, where we get that movie, and where that movie exists within the movie we're watching had events not happened. I think once you set that type of tone, you're onto a winner, and that justifies the relationship aspects and just everything that happens minus the horror. Because, you know, it's interesting if something is a horror movie and then the horror is such a minuscule part of it, is it entirely a horror? Or does the ending and what it becomes almost put a full stop that yes, everything you're watching up to this point was leading to a horror, but so much of the movie you've seen isn't a horror at all? So I mean, it feels obvious to say, but I guess that's why how a movie ends really dictates how you feel about it. So yeah, very good relationship story, even with his son, the opening scene. I didn't really get cheesy TV at all. with this, actually. And this is something I wanted to ask myself, and you touched on it, and I couldn't figure out where I was culturally at the time as opposed to now when I watched it. But I think the movie answers it, but again, it's impossible to know. So when I'm watching the scene when his friend hatched this plot that they're going to use this to get a date and find a woman, and they're going to create this movie, and how likely the movie's to be made in the first place is one thing, if it's actually going to happen, but they're going to just use it as a way to get women or get a date or whatever. Now, I was wondering when we're watching this, how much we're meant to enjoy that scene and how much we're just meant to take that as good natured at the time. It's got the fun, lively music, it's got fun camera shots, it's got a lot of women, and it's just got a fun energy from a very male perspective. Now, I'm watching that in 2025, and I've talked to a lot of women, and once you have that other perspective in mind, it's hard, and like you mentioned, Harvey Weinstein, it's hard to find this scene fun in the way you might have at the time. But even taking it as 1999, I think that scene is meant to almost make you complicit in the male gaze and the male perspective, because on the one hand, if you're watching this scene and you're thinking of it from an immature man, you're thinking, oh, well, you know, it's fun. They're setting up a scenario where they can meet lots of pretty girls. The girls can always say no. It's not forceful in the way that they're setting it up, but it is very manipulative and it's very seedy. In actuality, when you take in the female perspective on top of that, but if you're just taking it as from a male point of view and you're not really taking into account what you're putting girls through, the women through, in a very subtle way, then you can watch that scene and you can think it's fun. Oh, they're meeting women. They're just using this as a way to get dates. You know, they're still going on dates with them there, and then they're just using that as a way to meet women. They're not Harvey Weinsteining them. But then you start to think, yeah, but a lot of these women are desperate for work. A lot of these women are they're there for their own circumstances, and then the scene goes on, and then you realize a lot of these women have problems. A lot of these women are broken. A lot of these women, like visibly, I'm not talking about undercover like the main actress, the main antagonist, I suppose. And then the movie starts to creep in the female perspective that we're not getting at this point, because we're following the two male characters, and even when they're at the bar, they're thinking, oh, there's a lot of stupid girls here, and just the way they talk, we're not really thinking about the women. They're very much in the peripheral. They're very much not there as characters up until that point. And yeah, I thought that was really good. The movie makes you complicit initially, and then just like the main character who examines his behavior towards women later on in the movie, where we see this scene where this woman that he works with, she's on the verge of tears, and we realize he had some encounter with her. Now, I want to know, was that even when he was married or not? Who knows? It's never really said. So I think as the character examines the way he's treated women and the way he looks at women, like again his son's partner, when he brings it home, he does an okay, like a thumbs up sign almost. And just the way he is judging women, and just in a very, not the worst kind of way, but in the way when you take in how you treat someone and their perspective, then regardless of your intentions, your actions, no matter how, not to say innocent, but no matter how unaware of the circumstances that things could cause, has massive effects for the people that involve you in their lives. And again, the ultimate manifestation of that is the woman he goes on a date with and how abused she is and her fucked up childhood. It's almost like a, not to say hyperbolic, because stuff like that does happen in terms of the abuse she's received, but it's more like she becomes the living manifestation of all these little things that every woman has endured by some men, and that we almost don't think about as men often. And this isn't me on my soapbox, I'm just talking about just minor things that you wouldn't even think about, like going up to a woman, chatting her up, might make her feel extremely uncomfortable and make her feel extremely nervous. Or for instance, like when I'm walking, I'm a quick walker, and I guess I've got an intimidating face. When I'm walking late at night and there's a woman in front of me, I cross over to to like just not make her panic, and that's something that like I wouldn't even think of a few years ago, and then someone else is having a completely different experience and living in a completely different world based on your actions that you wouldn't even be aware of. So there's all that going on in the movie that I appreciate. And there's a great scene where she's just waiting by the phone for the phone call, almost like dormant, waiting for this track to come into play, which I liked as well. Now, as the movie gets more towards the horror side, again, let's just talk about the torture scene, for instance. The torture scene is very good. The torture scene has got lots of nice little details to it, like the words she uses while she's putting the pins in his eyes and the pins on his chest. You mentioned she's okay with sawing off the foot. She's chill with it. I would go as far as to say she's getting off on it. And if you go by the flashbacks we have where she received violence and someone else seemed to be getting off on it, and you can see how that manifested in the type of way she gets her revenge. So it's a very technically and emotional and, I would say, necessary for the type of film that's trying to be made, torture scene, and I can appreciate that. But it's like when you're watching a musical and you realize, wow, that's really well choreographed, that's brilliant, that's tonally resonant regarding the song, regarding the themes of the musical, but I just don't like the song itself. I don't like that type of music. So no matter what can be done, it's just, I don't like that type of music. And that's how I felt about the torture scene. It's not something that I want to be spending 30 minutes watching, regardless of how good it is. It's just not for me. So I can appreciate it's a very good torture scene, but why am I spending half an hour of my life in that graphic detail? I really like the director as well, Takashi Miike. There's another great scene where we see the guy living in the bag and he's drinking milk, and he's missing all his hands and limbs. Takashi Miike loves that trick and that image because I think it was 13 Warriors or something, the remake. there's a character who's kept exactly like that, and I don't know if that comes from historical Japanese torture or something like that in olden times, but he does love that image, and it is as startling an image in the samurai movie as it is in this movie. So yeah, it's one of those cases where I can appreciate that this is a very well made movie, and I had a good enough time with it. I don't really have any complaints about it, but I just didn't have enough of a good time. Not enough as a good time as you, but I just didn't have enough. Sorry, I just didn't have as good a time as you, shall I say. Just one more thing before I forget about the dream sequence. No, if that turned out to be a dream, and I get what you're saying about the moment where you're thinking, oh wow, that he has to now continue a relationship with that woman after having an epiphany almost of a dream in how he's treated women, and is he taking advantage of this young person? That would have been a good moment. And then I think personally, the more I'd be talking and thinking about the movie, I would be thinking, oh god, that was it wouldn't be good to rewatch, first of all, I think, and two, yeah, it still would have fallen prey of the dream trope. And the other thing is, I mean, you seem to have thought that it was all a dream was a possibility. I mean, while she's torturing him, she says, when you are in extreme and the most levels of pain, you'll find out who you are. So the fact that when his son, who appears to die in that moment, and we cut back to that place, for me was his mind shutting down. Like, I never thought for 1 minute that it was all a dream. I thought, right, she's already set up that when his loved one dies, that he will break and know who he really is, and then he pops back to that place. And I think knowing that, as I did, that it wasn't all a dream, and knowing that he's gone in that place and has a quick respite from the situation he's actually in, is horrifying. When he is almost having a breather and you know he's heading right back to that torture scene, and you're just waiting for an almost intermission where he has time to reflect in that hotel room, but he's going right back to that location. It is like a ticking time bomb of a reprieve for both him and us as the audience. So that was very effective, actually. The use of it was all a dream, that you thought it was all a dream. I thought that was a brilliant trope that you don't see very often in this way. So yeah, good movie. I like Takashi Miike. I've got a few of his samurai movies on my streaming service, and yeah, I think I've already seen it, but the other one, the Harishi or whatever it's called, I'll probably rewatch that one again now at some point as well. But yeah, that was my triple threat of movies in a day.
Hey man, glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, brilliantly said, everything you said there. I agree with almost all of it. Yeah, it's a really special movie. I mean, it's funny, like, so you were talking earlier in the voice note about how it's sort of a disservice to the movie to announce to the viewer, whether it's through marketing or through recommendation or by association with other films in a list or whatever, that it is a horror film, because you're robbing them of the experience of just watching that film through and not having a clue where it's going to go. And yeah, that I wonder, because it's so long that my memory is absolutely awful, but I wonder how close to that experience I had when I first watched it. Because I doubt I would have been seeing it with like zero context. Like, I doubt I would have been that open to watching movies that was just like, tell me nothing. I just like, I see that it's got like a high star rating and I just watch it. But I do distinctly remember being fully settled into the version of the film that is the first half of the film, and then it being like a real whiplash when it got to the second half. Now, I don't know if that was if I got to the point of forgetting that there was any horror element to it, but at this point, I mean, many years later now, it is one of the most celebrated horror films of all time. If you look up any list of the best horror films ever, like it's right up near the top. And it's going to be very difficult, I think, for anyone to come upon it not knowing what it is. Although I'm sure it's happening. I'm sure there are people out there who are like kind of got a friendship like ours where they can go, just here's a movie and just like no, don't tell the person anything else. It's interesting watching it, as you said, like the way you've watched it now and the way I've obviously rewatched it, knowing what's coming to an extent. And I guess it's sort of a testament to the quality of the drama in the first half of the movie that it holds up so much. The acting, just the general, like you referenced Correda, it does have that sort of slice of life. How are people existing as humans on Earth? Like that, it kind of draws you in on that basis. And yeah, it's it doesn't, I mean, I wouldn't know if I go as far as it doesn't need anything else, but they could have literally just done the whole movie where it's just like, what's it like being a widow or widower, is it? Like going into the world of dating again. That's a really interesting subject matter. And I mean, I love everything you said about like, as men in the world, dating or interacting with women in any capacity. It could be walking along the street, like you said, you might not be thinking about her, like what baggage she could have, what traumas she could have, what sensibilities she could have. And we see him early in the movie, like where he, like you said, he gives the thumbs up to his son. It's like, you've acquired a girlfriend. Like it was the same with the whole audition thing. They are there to be acquired and fix a hole in my soul, but not really accounting for how broken they might be and how volatile that is. Like, it's like, you know yourself, but you don't necessarily know the other girl that you are swiping left or right on Tinder. Like, you don't know how broken she could be. And therefore, you really don't know what your actions, or, you know, you might not be, people think about themselves. And I think this is a good example. This guy is a perfect example of like a good person shown with all of the complexity that actually exists under the hood of good people. Like good people, and I'm not trying to reduce people down to good people and bad people. Obviously don't think that way, but just to put it in very reductive terms, a good person, if you take the worst stuff they've ever did, you take their most inconsiderate impulses and everything like that, there's going to be some cobwebs there. They're not just perfect, 100% morally pure through and through. A good person has the worst things they ever did, their weakest suits or flaws or whatever. And what if like a decent, nice person had all of their worst shit that they bring to the world punished unjustly? Like, not, I mean, it's completely disproportionate punishment. Obviously, having your legs cut off and stuff like that. Maybe what he needs is maybe like a gentle conversation or something. But still, it is when you go out into the world, you know, you've spent decades with this woman that was your soulmate that you've been in love with, then you've spent 7 years or so in solitude. If you open the door again and you just go out into the fray of people, and maybe if you're doing it with this maybe more dubious method of like, you're being duplicitous with the way that you're engaging with these women. You're hooking up with, like, she's 24, I think, in the movie. Like, you really don't know that much, even though feels like he knows her through and through, because of the cover letter and everything. But you know, it could be a recipe for disaster, and obviously it's a horror spin on that. And you could have made the second half of this movie not horror and just drama, and still been a commentary and all that. But obviously, I'm a horror guy, and I like when horror is used in a very over-the-top way to comment on very real things that can be quite potent. So yeah, the first half of the movie works for me because it is sowing so many seeds that will come to fruition in the second half. And that's why, all right, so the dream sequence thing. So for starters, you didn't think it was a dream when he woke up from the dream. So that immediately robs it from that experience of how good of a movie it could be if it was just a dream. For me, as I'm watching it, he wakes up, so I'm like, it was just a dream, like maybe a premonition, but not reality anyway. And therefore, I've got like 5 minutes or so to sort of sit with that being the movie. And I think for a subtle character drama, which is what the first half of this movie is, about all of those subjects that I just mentioned, then having the guy go to sleep and have this crazy, very dreamlike, incredibly dreamlike series of events happen that are very much the way a dream examines those sorts of subject matters, or a nightmare. And then him waking up from it, I think, would be brilliant cinema. And the horror is not that he has to then be with her and sit with that. It's the horror is the nightmare. Then it's kind of like he's woke, quote, like, no pun intended. He has woken up in this dream, and he's realized, oh, I actually need to examine some of this stuff, and I actually don't fully know this woman, and now he's going to really start the relationship with her, but kind of leveled up, like I said, in how much he's thinking about himself and his actions and who he is and everything like that. I think that would be a brilliant movie. Obviously, if you didn't think it was a dream, then you don't get to experience that movie, albeit for a few minutes. And then when it goes back to the dream, it's like, oh, no, it is just, you know, a sort of classic horror thing, which is still brilliant. It's a brilliant movie and I really love it. But like, I think that would have been like a really special kind of way to end the film. And again, I say that as someone who hates that mechanic in storytelling, but I just, you know, I thought it was so earned from what the first half of this movie is talking about and considering, that it worked for me. Just looking over some of the notes that from your voice note there. So I don't know if I've ever told you this, but my mother's birthday is Halloween. You mentioned, I think, your nephew's birthday is Halloween and how cool of a birthday it is. So yeah, I've always Halloween and birthday have always been intrinsically linked. She's actually staying with me right now, so we'll be celebrating both Halloween and my mother's birthday tomorrow. My wife's made a barn brack, and we'll be, you know, going out trick-or-treating and all the rest of it. And yeah, Halloween is huge for me, absolutely huge. I mean, it wasn't huge for me as a adult before I had kids. Obviously liked it as a kid, and you're bobbing for apples and all that stuff. And then that kind of way adults celebrate Halloween, like where they have to go to parties dressed up. I've done it a few times, but it's not really my bag. I'm not really a dress up guy. I'm not really into the pageantry, that type of thing. But obviously now I have kids and we do trick-or-treating, and that energy has come into my life in a big way. And my daughter is really excited for Halloween every year. So we watch a lot of like spooky Mickey Mouse stuff and like the Charlie Brown Great Pumpkin Special and stuff like that. So yeah, obviously Spooktober I do every year, kind of, well, not kind of, but very much positioned because Halloween is the end of October, but also just Halloween itself is definitely something that I like. Although the big show comes afterwards with my obsession with Christmas. you talked about how the audition scene, because it is presented, like you said, as a fun, bouncy, lighthearted montage, how it sort of makes you complicit with the male gaze in this situation. And I very much agree with that. I think it's a male director, it's a male lead, it's up until that point in the movie an entirely male cast. And when you look at old movies, I watched one very recently. What was it? Oh, what was it? It was very recently. I watched a horror film that uses comedy soundtrack when they're showing the killer on screen. I can't remember, but an old one is Last House on the Left, which is like a very interesting, I think clumsy, but interesting and awkward and uncomfortable pairing between music's communicating one emotion, and then if you really think about what's happening here, this is not necessarily just full bouncy fun, but I think Miike, who I think we're both fans of, is using it very deliberately. Now, I don't know, because again, the Japanese culture, not even 1999 Japanese culture, but Japanese culture in general, is just so remote from me, and I have so little understanding of it that I couldn't begin to ponder on what the sort of battle of the sexes parameters are, what's okay, what's not okay, what a male director in the 90s would be thinking, where they'd be coming from, like what was the conversation there. It's hard to know, because this film feels very much like it could be directed by someone in 2025 who's like a feminist writer or something. Like it doesn't feel dated. It feels super clued in and super aware, but also that some of that could be just like I'm projecting it onto the film. So, but yeah, it is brilliant. And the more I think about the film, the more I talk about it with you, it's like kind of unveiling layers of how carefully considered this film is. So it's great. It's a great one to be in that family of like iconic horror movies, because it has a lot of depth, and it's just a very good film, even if you don't like the horror side. And you talked about how you don't really you didn't enjoy watching the torture scene. It went on too long. You thought it was very, very well done, very well made, but it's not your bag, and you kind of check out. So that's interesting, because that's definitely a difference between us. Like I love it in the right circumstances, when it's justified, and when it makes sense narratively, it makes sense tonally, it kind of makes sense in the movie, and it heightens it, it makes it worse, and it makes it scarier, and it makes it more devastating. I like extreme gore, torture, stuff like that. What I don't like is when it's gratuitous, and perhaps you felt it was in this movie, that they could have cut it, 5 minutes earlier, and you've got the picture, you've got the point. But for me, there is something really compelling about how relentless it is. Like she's bringing out more and more accoutrements. She's doing more and more things. There's always looming threat of what else is she going to do. Yeah, I think it's just a brilliant scene, and I wouldn't shave a second off it. But I think I'm not, as I'm watching it, as much as I'm uncomfortable for him, and it's cutting off the feet, particularly, you're watching that and you're like, this is not temporary pain that's going to go away. She's just, at the very least, changed the whole rest of his life. I mean, maybe she's going to kill him, but even if she doesn't, like, no going back from that. And so it's all just layering in so much doom and so much torture, really. And I think the film has slow burned its way to that point, and now it's kind of earned maximum bandwidth to go as extreme as it wants with this. And it's also, even now watching it all these years later, it is shocking. Like, to me, it's sort of transgressive in terms of your expectations of what you're going to see on screen in a movie. That can be great in when it comes to violence and stuff, where you go, Jesus Christ, that went so much further than I thought it would. Like, you know, it's just like a movie being more romantic than you thought a movie could be, or whatever. It's shocking. It's like breaking past what you thought you were going to get out of the movie. So I like that. I love the scene where she's waiting for the phone. Like I said, I remember that actually from when I watched it back in the day. Just it goes back a couple of times to her coiled up on the floor beside the phone, and then when it does ring, she doesn't grab it straight away. We just get a close-up of her lips slowly forming into a smile, and yeah, she's almost like a serpent, you know. She's really, the void between what she really is and how he's seeing her at that point in the movie is amazing. So yeah, that scene is great. And yeah, one little extra point, you mentioned in the movie, the guy who's been all chopped up drinking the bowl of milk. I think that's actually supposed to be a bowl of puke that she's puked. So yeah, it's even more grotesque and even more horrible. And like I said, I like the fuzzy, I mean, I don't have it crystal clear in my head. Maybe you can have it if you watch the film more closely, or maybe smarter or something. But for me, it's all a bit vague who she is and her story and all the characters and who they are, but not completely vague, but a bit vague. And I like that. Just she's almost like it's almost like a supernatural movie to an extent. Her, what she is, she's almost like a spirit for female oppression or something like that. So yeah, great movie. I'm glad you had a great time with it. And I know I've seen a few of his films. He's made a shitload of movies, so I might check out Miike on IMDb and see what the next one to hit is.
Yeah, more things uncovered from our conversations about movies, that it's your mother's birthday on Halloween. Maybe I knew that before, but I certainly wouldn't have come up in conversation if it wasn't for Spooktober. Yeah, not for this to devolve into a conversation about a good person or a bad person and what is that, blah blah blah. It's very simplistic if we did talk about that. But what I think this film is having a conversation about, and what I got from this movie, is the main character is dangerous, and I'm not talking about dangerous as in the main male character is dangerous to women because he thinks he's a nicer guy than he actually is. I think that's something that is prominent in this movie. And that's what allows him to almost do potential things that might leave a wake of destruction to women's lives. And I think that's what this movie is saying. Just look at yourself more. And obviously, I'm not getting on a soapbox or anything like that, but I think it's great to watch a character who thinks of himself as a good guy, and then we think of him as a good guy. But as the movie unfolds, we're thinking maybe you should have less of an opinion on yourself and you'll do better. You know, when I talk to the truly really good people in my life that I know, if you said to them you're a good person, they would almost be thinking, well, I need to do more, I need to do this, I need to do that. And then there's people who have a high opinion of themselves that probably haven't done that work. So I like that this movie is almost why ask what's that what's that thing that they take in South America? Ayahuasca. It's like an ayahuasca journey of the male ego of themselves. It's a bit like a fever dream at times. And yeah, when you're talking about the dream sequence, you say that I didn't have the experience of you because I knew it was a dream. And of course, I fundamentally agree with that on a twist level. But while we are taking that turn and it goes back to that room, I certainly realized and certainly agree with all the things that you say, that it was disgusting, and the fact that that could be a possibility, that it was a dream, a nightmare, and he's, like you said, it is how you dissect stuff in dreams sometimes. It is a bit like a fever dream. I'm aware with that. I think it's good stuff. For me, I got that in the scene, and then I'm allowed to pull back without discrediting the movie. So while you went the other way and you're saying to me that, oh no, I wish it went more that way, I feel like that movie would have been worse in rewatch. And I think, again, more is lost from going the full route in that direction than gained, because I experienced everything that you've experienced, other than a definitive answer of it not being a dream. And that was enough for me to experience what you claim you would have experienced more of had the movie continued down that route. And I think it still discusses all those things you said within that room, and then allows us to go back to the movie that this was built around. So yeah, I'm glad I got to have my cake and eat it in that sense. And yeah, I think as well, we're talking about the culture of Japan at the time and the battle of the sexes, or whatever you want to say. Obviously, we're far removed from that in 1999, and we're far removed from Japanese culture. But I think, just going back to that audition scene again, when she is holding him down and torturing him, she makes reference that you only made up this audition so you can manipulate women. So I think the movie, you're obviously not meant to be on the side of the character that was torturing, but you certainly are sympathetic towards her story of what you know about it. So I think the director does want you to confront that earlier scene that you almost experienced and took part in a way similar to in Reservoir Dogs, where there's that torture scene and that music, it's fun, and then boom, you get confronted with an ear chopped off, and then it has the opposite effect, the torture in this, in Reservoir Dogs. And in this, we almost get a delay between your regret at being complicit in that scene, and then we get the torture, we get the Michael Madsen a little bit later in the movie in Audition, towards the very end. So yeah, but it works the same way. But now you had longer to think you are better than you actually are, just like the character. Yeah, and with this director as well. Oh yeah, with the torture. So I didn't think it was gratuitous. I've got no problem with anything being gratuitous. It's just, what's the best way of describing it? You know, when people are talking about something like rape in movies, why are they showing the rape? Why are they doing that? Why do they have to show that? And then I'm thinking, well, why do they have to show murder? Why are we getting affected at one thing and not the other? And of course, we're desensitized towards headshots and things like that. And there's certain things that are depicted that are worse for other people. So I feel like with the torture, it's a bit like that. I don't think it's gratuitous. I think it works. I think it fits. I don't think it's out of place. I think it's shocking. I don't need to see in great detail how much the human anatomy can get butchered up, personally. And I think, I mean, obviously this is my bag, but I think there's ways you can get the same experience of shock without having to go into so much detail. And now that might seem crazy, and maybe it's not true what I said. Obviously, you're getting the shock of seeing that level of mutilation. I guess you can't get that from cutting away, but just the shock of somebody torturing someone and someone going to those extremes. I think there was a time when I think movies that were 12s got very good at making movies seem more violent and shocking than they were without giving us the extra bit of violence. Now, again, I'm not making the case that this movie would be better without that. In fact, it would not be as famous, and it would not be as revered in the horror community, and it would not be as shocking. I just feel like I got my fill from what the scene was making me feel at a certain point, and then it continued anyway. And like I said, it's just personal taste, really, because I can't criticize anything in that scene. Everything in that scene works. Everything in that scene is brilliant, really, as far as torture scenes go. It's very well done, and it's just fantastic from a technical level, from a filmmaking level, and from a story level, and just from a torture level. You could probably get someone who's reviewing torture scenes and torture throughout history, and they would think, yeah, this is brilliant. And I agree with all that. I'm not disputing anything other than my own personal taste, and as it is my own personal experience of watching that movie, that's why I'm talking so much about it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's the personal taste is really going to be the major driver in it, and in terms of how much you like a given movie. We're not like film analysis machines. We're people with tastes, and ultimately, if something isn't kind of what you enjoy watching, then there's a ceiling to how much you can appreciate it. If you showed me the best ever Shakespeare production, in terms of not deviating from the original text, or you showed me the best Broadway musical of all time or something, I'd probably be like, that was very, very well done. That was excellent. Zero complaints, zero notes. They knocked it out of the park. Now let me go back to watching what I like to watch, kind of thing. And so, not everyone is going to like extreme, prolonged gore, torture, and it is that. So yeah, makes complete sense. And then what you're saying about the dream sequence stuff, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I agree with everything that you said about the movie. I guess either way, whether the film is presented as it currently is, which is your preference, or if it had been turned out as all a dream, which was my preference, either way, like you said, you get to kind of like experience everything that the dream idea has to offer, whether it really was all a dream, or just the idea of what it was. What if it was all a dream? It still gives you the opportunity to kind of imagine that. I guess when it was revealed that it was all a dream, I was so ecstatic about that, because I thought it was such like a brilliant screenwriting, that then I guess I lost that then with the sort of double fake out or whatever. But it's a brilliant movie. I'm perfectly happy with it as is, and I'm glad to have revisited it, because it's on that. There's always this list of movies that you saw, a long time ago, and then you've spent decades hearing people rave about, and you're like, I remember thinking it was decent. Maybe I'm undervaluing it, and then you check it out, you're like, yeah, that is actually like a lot more impressive than I thought it was. So yeah, good flick. And let's keep exploring his back catalogue.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.